This is why you should always keep your phone charged. A girl named Marissa came home from school at around 3 p.m. She walked in the door and told her mom that some random number kept calling her all day. Her mom told her the person may have the wrong number and just to ignore it. Marissa said okay and begins to do her homework. A couple hours later, she receives a phone call from the same number. Marissa answers it this time and says, "Hello?" The man then says, "We finally found you. Don't worry, bunny." Marissa begins to panic and tells her mom what just happened. Her mom's face goes blank and says, "What did the man just call you?" Marissa says, "He called me bunny." Her mom yells and says, "Grab your stuff, we need to leave." Marissa, confused, packs her things and gets into the red car. Her mom begins driving fast and turns on the radio. The radio says, "The baby named Marissa who was kidnapped in the hospital 10 years ago has been found and police are searching for a red car." Marissa looks at the woman and says, "Who are you?" The woman looks back and says, "You can call me mom."
This just might be the craziest spring break story you've ever heard. Me and 14 of my friends decided to go to Cabo for spring break when we were in college. We rented an Airbnb and thought everything was going to be so much fun. But on the first night, there was already a couple of my friends that were too tired to go out, so we just decided to split up. Half of my friends stayed at the house and half of us went out to a bar. The bar we ended up going to was right on the water, and as we're sitting there eating our food, a yacht pulls up. And I don't mean like a small yacht, I mean like a huge party yacht. There was little dinghy boats bringing people to and from the yacht. My friend that spoke Spanish went over and started talking to one of the boat taxi drivers. He said that if we wanted to, we could all jump on his boat and he would take us out to the yacht. Since it was spring break, of course I couldn't pass up on this opportunity, so I started running towards his boat to jump on because he was screaming for us to hurry. I was in such a hurry to make sure that I got on that boat, I didn't even look back to see if my friends were behind me. By the time that I realized none of my friends had come with me, I was already halfway to the yacht. Since I was already halfway to the yacht and I didn't speak any Spanish, I just decided to wait it out, get on the yacht, and make some friends when I get there. Luckily, there was plenty of other students there on spring break, so I made plenty of friends. I ended up just staying on the boat all night because the taxi stopped running, but as soon as I could get off in the morning, I went ahead and got off. I called a taxi to drive me back to the Airbnb, but whenever we pulled up to the gates of the neighborhood, there was security and police everywhere. My taxi driver kept driving and dropped me off at the front door, but when we pulled up to the Airbnb, it was literally surrounded by police. That's when I realized that this had to have something to do with me and my friends, and it wasn't just the area we were in. When I saw my friends, I ran up to them and asked them what was going on. It turned out that one of my friends who had stayed at the house ended up falling down the stairs in the middle of the night, breaking the banister and one of the paintings on the wall, and had to be rushed to the ER because he split his head open. The property manager had called the police to make sure that we paid for the damages to the house. The weird part is that they wanted it in cash and said we weren't leaving until we paid. My friend that spoke Spanish was the only one that was able to actually talk to the police. They told her that if we didn't pay for the damages to the house in cash, we weren't leaving the property. We had the money to pay for it, but not in cash because they were wanting over $2,000. We were all freaking out thinking that we were going to be held hostage here in Cabo forever. We all called our parents, who then contacted the U.S. Embassy, and before we knew it, our faces were all over the news with the headlines, 15 American college students held against their will in Cabo. At the moment, there was nothing we could do, so we just decided to go back in the house and sit down and wait. I guess the property manager had also ended up calling a maid service to help clean up the damage done inside the house. Whenever the maids got there, we explained to them what was going on and that we were absolutely terrified. Luckily, they had already seen the news, and so they were willing to help us. They moved all their cleaning supplies into the house and backed their van into the garage. They explained to my friend that if we all got in the van, they would drive us to a nearby hotel where we could stay the rest of the trip. The police were guarding the front door, but we all snuck around them and ended up getting out. We did have to stay in a gross hotel for about a week, though.
Storytime of how my best friend got so weirdly obsessed with me that she even plotted to kill my boyfriend. So at the time, me and this girl, let's just call her Olivia, had only been friends for about 2 years. I mean, we really did everything together. We were with each other 24/7, and I mean, we were pretty good friends. But the only thing about our friendship is she did not like when I had other friends. I mean, she didn't have any other friends herself, but literally she would joke around about strangling my other friends because she didn't like when I gave my attention to anyone else. But honestly, I just thought of it as a joke. And then I started dating this guy, let's just name him Jacob. He was probably the sweetest guy I had ever met, and he was a real simp for me. So we started dating and about 4 or 5 months go by, and he started getting these texts from a random number. And it would always be cringy things like leave her or you die, get away from her, and like stupid cringy threats. Then one night, me and him were just hanging out. Then he gets a text with his exact address saying he had till tonight to leave me or he wouldn't see another day. Then we hear a knock at the door. I'm running out of time, like for part 2. Part 2 of how my best friend got so weirdly obsessed with me that she plotted to kill my boyfriend. So continuing with the story, we heard a knock at the door and it ended up being her. And she said, "Oh, I'm just coming by to check on you and make sure you're okay." Mind you, we were at his house. And he looks at me like, what is she doing here? So I asked her to leave, and then she ends up getting so mad at me just because I asked her to give us alone time. So the night goes on, and then when I get home, she's in my room. At this time, my whole entire family was out of town, and I was the only one home. So I was like, hey. It was literally just like a normal night, and then I go to shower, and when I get back out of the shower, she's gone. And then my boyfriend calls me, and he goes, why is Maddie here? She had like this black mask on, but she's stupid enough to not realize that we know it's her. And I mean, we're being real here. She was my best friend at the time, so of course he's not going to call the police on her. But she had a knife in her hand, and he opens the door and he like pins her against the wall and then calls 911, I guess. And then to sum it up, when they get there, she tells them everything that she was going to do, and then they put her in a mental hospital. But she said that she was going to murder everybody that gets close to her.
Crazy story time about how I found my aunt and my boyfriend hooking up at a family function. So every year my mom and stepdad would have a Christmas party and everyone from both sides of the family would come. And I also invited my boyfriend. And at this time my boyfriend and I were both juniors in high school. So everybody came to the party and everything was going good. Well, like an hour into the party, all the adults were super drunk. So before we all opened gifts, I decided to help my mom clean up dinner. So while I'm washing the dishes, I look over and my aunt and boyfriend are talking a lot. And she started to get really touchy with him, but I didn't think anything of it because she was super drunk. So after I'm done cleaning up, we all start opening gifts. And my boyfriend goes up to my room to go get his phone off the charger. And after he went upstairs, my aunt was like, oh, I need to go throw up. So about 10 minutes goes past and my boyfriend's still up in the room grabbing his phone, so I went to check on him. And I walk upstairs to see my aunt and my boyfriend laying on my bed making out. Like for part 2. Part 2 to how I caught my aunt and my boyfriend hooking up at a family function. So like I said, they are laying on my bed making out. Doors wide open. They don't even bother to shut the door. And both of their shirts are off. And I think I should just put in here, my aunt is like 28. She's on my stepdad's side. She's really young. So they look up and my aunt's just like drunk as fuck looking at me. And she's like, do you want to join? Like, bitch, what the fuck? So I'm just like shook and I start screaming. Everybody rushes up the stairs and my mom pushes me out of the way and sees my boyfriend and my aunt laying on my bed with their shirts off. So my mom starts screaming at everybody. So my mom calls the cops, says that an adult is touching an underage boy, and she calls his mom, tells her what happened. So my boyfriend and I broke up, so that spread around the whole school, and word got out that they actually started seeing each other.
Story time on how my mom threw hot boiling water at my dad. Okay, so boom. My parents been together for 15 years at this point and I was only 14. My parents were only dating for a couple of months and then my mom got pregnant with me. So they ended up getting married soon after. The only problem with that is my mom never really got to know my real dad. He had anger issues, and I'm talking real anger issues. And he refused to go to therapy. Oh, I'm sure you guys guessed it. My dad was putting his hands on my mom, and I mean beating her for dumb reasons. And every time I tried to stop it, my dad would literally turn around and beat me too. You would think he would stop for his daughter, but because he would beat me so bad, my mom always told me to stay out of it. Well, one day my mom was cooking and she was boiling some water. My dad came home and seen that she was cooking and got angry. He said that his food should be ready before he gets home. My mom just stayed quiet and he went to go hit her. But this day, my mom was tired of it. So something changed. Like for part 2. Part 2 on how my mom threw hot boiling water at my dad. So like I said, once my dad got home, he was super angry. He told my mom that his food should have been ready already, even though my mom was literally cooking it. So he went to beat her. But my mom was sick of it. But as he went to hit her, my mom just took the boiling water and threw it at his face. My dad screamed, ran upstairs, and went into the bathroom. My mom took the keys, ran to the car, and we drove to her sister's house. My mom was hysterical. No one in our family knew what was going on in our household, so we had to explain everything to everyone. We called the cops on my dad, and now he's in jail. But I did ask my mom what changed this time. She said she couldn't stand there anymore, but not because of her, but because of me. She didn't want me to grow up thinking this was okay and that this how men treat their women. And she definitely didn't want him to lay one more finger on me ever again. So she had to build up the courage for herself and for me both. And I will always be super proud of my
story time. My best friend slashed my tires. But before I get into the story time, I just want to let you guys know that my website is now officially open and the link is right in bio. So as you all know, I used to take clients, and during this time I was blowing up on social media. So I had this celebrity reach out to me and they wanted their nails done, and I'm like, of course. So I had to travel to them And of course, the first person I had to tell was my best friend. I told her all the details, where I was going, what time I was leaving, how far the distance was. And I thought she would be more happy for me, but her response was like, oh, that's cool, I guess. But I didn't really think much of it. So the morning of, I had to get up early to drive out there because it was a 2-hour drive. And then I noticed all my tires are slashed. And I checked the cameras and it was her. But that's okay because I got her dad to drive me.
One time I was behind the register at Victoria's Secret. This customer walks in and immediately everybody spots her as a red flag. She's just picking up items, throwing them in her bag, not looking at sizes, not looking at colors. So everybody's like, Everyone's on their walkie like, watch this customer. She's coming to the fitting room. She's headed to the cash wrap. Somebody get her. Check her ID. Get her. Get her. She has a bag full of stuff. And guess who gets her at the register? Me. So she comes to my register and she dumps out her stuff. And we're having a regular conversation. Hi, how are you? Yada, yada, yada. Her total comes up to probably between $700 to $900. It was expensive. My manager is at the register next to me talking to me on the walkie. Ashley, make sure you get that ID. Don't matter what she's using, make sure you get that ID. So I ask her for the ID because she's paying credit. Why do you need to ask for my ID? Just take it, run it. I'm like, no ma'am, I'm sorry, I need your ID for the purchase. She starts to raise her voice at me. So she's raising her voice at me and I'm like, but I just couldn't, y'all. So I was like, I can raise my voice too. Do you want to play this game? Because I'll win, promise. And she's like, oh, well, what time do you get off work? And I'm like, I'm closing. I'm actually getting off at 11. Would you like to pick me up? And then she calls me stupid. She's like, you're fucking stupid. And I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm going to eat that. Then she calls me a dumb bitch. Whew. So I took a deep breath. And I said, fuck you, you dumbass bitch. Your broke ass can't even afford these motherfucking clothes and you over here trying to scam me. Fuck off my line. And honestly, me and her just started going back and forth at each other like, My manager's like, go to the back, go to the back, go to the back. I'm still cursing her out as I'm walking to the back of the store. I really thought I would get fired, but I actually didn't.
Story time about how I found out my sugar daddy was stalking me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I signed up to a sugar daddy website last year. I lost my job because of COVID. Just started my own small business and things were not going well. I also helped my parents out with money because I didn't want them to be working during COVID. I signed up to a website and instantly I started getting messages. One man stood out because he was very active and owned several businesses. I told him I didn't want to meet up because I just wasn't going to do that, but also because of COVID. He agreed to have a phone conversation with me and then eventually he offered me $5,000 a month. This was more than enough to help me and my parents out. After that, I was basically his online companion. He would text me and I would text back. We went out to dinner a few times, but because of COVID, we kept our distance. It was truly the perfect scenario for me. Then I noticed that he started to get really clingy. If I didn't text him back right away, he would get upset. One day, I got another message from the sugar daddy website. Another man was asking me to go out to dinner twice a week, and he wanted to pay me $1,000 for this. So I said, of course. When I told sugar daddy number one that I'd be busy 2 days out of the week, he got really mad and asked me where I lived. I told him I couldn't tell him. Part 2 is up. That's when my sugar daddy asked me where I lived. I was not about to tell him where I lived. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I told him I couldn't tell him. And he got really upset and offered me $2,000 more, which means that he would be paying me $7,000 a month. Then he said that he didn't want me to be with any other sugar daddies. At this point, I hadn't even told him that I was approached by another sugar daddy. So how did he know that I was talking to another one? I accepted his offer of $7,000 a month, but this only made him even worse. He would call me all the time and ask me where I was, and he would constantly ask me where I lived. He noticed a change in me, and that's when he offered to buy me a car, a Mercedes to be exact. I didn't know if I should accept or not because I knew it would make him feel like he had more ownership over me. I told him that I wasn't sure if I should accept the car because of his behavior. Then he said that he would buy me my own apartment. I felt really creeped out, so I decided not to answer his phones or his messages the rest of the night. 2 hours later, I'm laying in bed and I hear a really hard knock at my door. It was him. Part 3, my sugar daddy starts banging on my front door. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. And he didn't know where I lived. I look through the peephole and I tell him to leave. That's when he shows me a wad of cash. He tells me I can keep it with no strings attached. I said no, and that's when he started calling me names. He started yelling really loud. I was hoping my neighbors would hear and call the cops. In order to calm him down, I opened the door and I let him in. Big mistake. He asked to use my bathroom and that's when I grabbed his phone. I saw on his camera roll that he had pictures and video of me. He'd been following me around for months. I started calling the cops, but that's when he came out of the bathroom. I asked if he could stay over and I said yes. I was so scared. We're supposed to have dinner tonight. The cops said they can't help because he hasn't hurt. Story time about how I got catfished by my best friend. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. My now ex-best friend and I hung out almost every single day. We were super close. Let's call her Natalie. Natalie and I would sometimes get into drama, and her mom didn't like this. She considered me a bad influence on Natalie. But honestly, the drama was coming from both sides. Natalie and I had a group chat with one other person. One day, Natalie sends me a message through the group chat saying that she couldn't be my best friend anymore and that she's really sorry. She really didn't explain why, though. I was crushed. She had been my best friend for so long. 3 weeks ago, I noticed that someone added me on Snapchat by search. I didn't really think too much about it. I added them back and we started having a conversation. She was a young girl my age and we started having conversations about boys we had crushes on, school, and lots of other things. I asked her to send me a picture of herself and she said she couldn't. That should have been the first red flag. Then we decided to meet up at the mall. I wait for her at the mall but she never shows up. I'm at the mall waiting for this girl to show up but she never does. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Like I said before, this girl told me she couldn't send me any pictures, so I didn't even know what she looked like. That's when I started suspecting something. We got along so well in our Snapchat conversations, it was almost too good to be true. So of course, I decide to call her. And guess who answers? Natalie, with her new friends who she knows that I hate. At that moment, I realized that she dumped me and then got with these new girls that she knew I hated. Of course, I was furious. I wanted to say something, but before I could, Natalie hung up the phone. And of course she did. She knew I was going to go off on her. Well, I start calling Natalie's phone several times, and she doesn't answer. Then I see that she unadded me off Snapchat and blocked me. So now I have no way of getting in contact with her. I spent weeks talking to this girl only to find out it was my ex-best friend catfishing me. So of course, I drive all the way to Natalie's house and her mom answers. Part 3 is up. So I show up to my ex-best friend's house who's been catfishing me for weeks. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Her mom was not happy to see me. Like I mentioned before, Natalie's mom thought I was a bad influence on her because we always got into drama. I proceed to tell Natalie's mom everything in detail. Her mom was shocked. She couldn't believe that her little daughter would be capable of such a thing. She was so mad, and it was so satisfying to me. I leave Natalie's house and I go home. The next day, I see that all of Natalie's new friends are posting on their social media saying that Natalie's phone got taken away for a few months, and that whoever did it, F you. I know they know it's me. It turns out Natalie's mom took her phone away for a whole month and deleted all of her social media. She totally deserves it. Natalie and her new friends are in a different school. And here's the kicker, I'm gonna be going to the same school. Now I'm just hoping they don't try to do something to me. And if they try, I'm so ready.
Story time. My boyfriend cheated on me with my brother. By the way, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So this took place in middle school. I was in 7th grade. And then one day there was a new kid in my class. His name was Dylan. And I like making people feel welcome. So I was just talking to him and showing him around the school. And after that, I just ended up getting his number and we started texting. After texting for a few months, he finally asked me out, so I was super happy. Then I started inviting him over my house, but I would tell my parents he's just a friend because I was too young to date. But he would always be over my house. Since my brother was only a year older, he would always be hanging out with us as well. So during this time, soccer season came up, so I couldn't really hang out after school anymore. So Dylan and my brother would just continue hanging out without me. I didn't really think much about it, but one day my practice got canceled due to the weather. And when I came home, you won't believe what I saw. Part 2 is up. Part 2. Like I said in part 1, my soccer practice got canceled early due to the weather, so I got to come home early. And the first thing that I do when I get home is run into my brother's room, because usually Dylan and my brother are just playing video games, but not this time. I walked into them making out. So at this point, I didn't even know how to react because neither one of them has ever came out to anybody. I was just overall confused and a little pissed off. It turns out they both had feelings for each other and they both came out at the same time. And I didn't speak to either one of them for like a month, but I got over it because I realized how much my brother really loves Dylan. But now fast forward 8 years, they are still together and they plan on getting married soon. If you want to send me a story time, send it to my Instagram at Anacrylics.
Story time about when my mom caught me doing it with my best friend.
I was 16 at the time, and there was this new boy that moved in across the street from us. He was super cute, and I noticed him right away. My parents were super strict. I wasn't allowed to have a boyfriend or even any guy friends, and I knew right away that I wanted to at least become this guy's friend because he was so cute. So one day I told my mom, hey, why don't we take cookies or something to welcome the new neighbors in town? And my mom was like, that's a great idea. So we end up going over and we meet them. They're really nice. And the cute boy comes downstairs and he tells his mom he's going to go to Bible study. Well, when we get home, I tell my mom, hey, you know what? Maybe I should join a Bible study group too. And my mom was like, great idea. She even told me to go ask him about it since he had mentioned it. One day he's mowing the lawn, so I decided to go talk to him and ask him about the Bible study group. He actually ended up taking me there that same day and we had a fun class. Over the next few weeks, we became really, really good friends. Best friends. We told each other everything. But there was always attraction between. Part 2. So my neighbor, I'll call him Curtis, we're really good friends at this point, but we were always attracted to each other, but because we were in Bible study together and our parents were very religious, we kind of tried to stay away from anything. One day, we're in my house chilling in my room because I knew my mom wouldn't be home for a while, so I told him to just come upstairs. We ended up eating Pop-Tarts and watching a Netflix show. The whole time I was mustering the courage to tell him that I really liked him because I really felt that I wanted to be honest with him instead of just lying to him, and the whole reason why I even got into the Bible study group was to be with him, or at least spend time with him. So finally, I just blurted it out. I said, I like you, and I like you like a lot. He just stares at me blankly. He doesn't know what to say, and I could tell that he was kind of nervous. So I said, do you like me too? He said, yes, you know that I do. And then we started making out. This was the first time I'd ever been kissed, and it was the first time I'd ever had a boy in my room by myself. I kept thinking my mom could come home at any moment, so I told him that he should go home. Suddenly, we're on my bed, and we're doing things that I'd never done before. Suddenly, my door swings open, and guess who it is? Part 3. So my mom swings the door open, and she sees us on my bed doing stuff. Of course, I'm mortified. I'm super embarrassed. I'm also embarrassed because I know how she's going to react in front of him. My mom, of course, just starts yelling her head off. Then we walk over to his house. She proceeds to tell his mom what we did. And then 5 minutes later, my dad walks into their house. I was really afraid of my dad. So now we're in their kitchen and his parents and my parents are just staring us down and telling us that what we did was completely wrong. Then my dad starts saying that we need to get married. I can tell Curtis is freaking out. Of course, I'm freaking out too. His parents actually agree that we should get married. Thankfully, my mom was completely against it and she said, absolutely not, they're too young. I literally felt like I was dying. I was obviously grounded for months, couldn't go anywhere, I couldn't do anything, and I obviously didn't speak to Curtis again. Then my mom tells me that Curtis and his family actually moved away. My heart was completely broken. A few years later in college, I contacted him through Facebook. We met up and we've been together ever since. I knew that our connection back then was super strong and it is now.
Did you know that you can die from chewing gum? And I don't mean choking. Yeah, I didn't either. Allow me to explain. Trigger warning. 19-year-old Samantha Jenkins was your typical adult teen, aside from her addiction to chewing gum. But why would her mother be concerned? It's not like she was out partying or making irresponsible choices. One afternoon, Samantha went out to lunch with her sister where she grabbed a soda to bring home with her. After, she began complaining of a profound stomach ache and claimed her soda was going right through her. Her mom hurried to the kitchen to prepare her some tea when she heard an ominous thump coming from her daughter's upstairs room. She found her lethargic on the floor where she asked, "Is this how it feels to die?" Samantha began convulsing. Her family rushed her to the hospital, where she was induced in a coma. She never stopped seizing, making it impossible to give her fluids or meds. Tragically, Samantha never came back. Upon autopsy, several large chunks of green chewed gum were found stuck to her stomach lining. Her electrolytes were severely out of whack. It appeared that somehow the excessive gum chewing poisoned her to death.
Story time about how my ex-boyfriend accused me of cheating on an all-girls trip. So a little background information, I was 14 or 15 around the time, and it was the summer of my freshman year. So within the last few weeks of my 8th grade year, one of the more popular boys asked me out, and we're gonna call him Carson. I wasn't like super popular at the school, but I was like a medium maybe. But I was raised in a super strict household, where the only phone that I pretty much had was one that was able to call 911 and my parents. And I especially was not allowed to be talking to boys. So Carson had the great idea of giving me his old phone, and throughout the summer, I would text him on there. Well, I started to realize him getting really toxic. Anytime that he would see my Snapchat location change, he would be like, "Where are you going? Why didn't you tell me you were going here?" So I started distancing myself a little bit from him. Also because our relationship was just moving way too fast. Within the first month of us dating, he was talking about wanting to marry me. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how my ex-boyfriend accused me of cheating on him on an all-girls trip. So like I said, I started distancing myself from him because he became too attached and was just way too toxic. Well, I was also in a lot of clubs in school, and a few of them would require me to go on trips. Well, the one that I went on was an all-girls trip, and before I left, I texted Carson letting him know that I wouldn't have my phone all week. Well, on the last night of my trip, there was a girls and boys dance. There was like a group of boys from a different school that we were meeting up with, and I tried staying back at the cabin, but they wouldn't let me. So we started doing dances that required partners, so I was pretty much forced to dance with one of the boys. Well, when I came back home, I got 100 texts from Carson calling me a bunch of nasty names, and you can probably guess them. And somebody got a picture of me dancing with one of the boys, and Carson sent it to me and said, "We're done." So after that, I just ignored him. And then literally that night at 1 a.m., he was texting me saying, "I miss you, please come back to me," like for part 3 about how my ex-boyfriend accused me of cheating on him on an all-girls trip. So like I said, I received over 100 messages from him. He got a picture of me dancing with one of the boys and said, "We're done." And then at 1 in the morning, he's like, "I miss you so much. Please don't leave me. Like, I've been doing so bad while you were gone." So of course I didn't accept his apology and I just blocked him on all my social media. And the next day I wake up to messages on my Instagram, my Snapchat, my Facebook. Like, who even uses that? Unless you're talking to family. Well, then Carson decides to tell everybody at my school about how I'm a lying, cheating scumbag. And now, 3 years later, no good guy from my school wants to date me. So now whenever I'm talking to a guy, I have to make sure that they're not affiliated with Carson in any way. But low-key, I had a really good glow-up, so all the hot boys want to talk to me now. And Carson's pretty much still a scumbag.
This is why you should always watch videos to the end. In 2003, a woman came home to her apartment to see that her door was unlocked. She went inside, nothing was missing, so she assumed she must have left it open. When it happened a few more times, but still nothing was missing in her apartment, she went out and got a camera, set it up in her apartment aimed at the front door. The next day, her door was unlocked, so she reviewed the footage. She watches in horror as late in the night, her front door opens and in walks this tall, creepy man who looks around and then walks towards her bedroom off camera. She immediately sprints out of her apartment and calls the police, who show up and tell her to go back in her apartment and just try to stay calm, and that they would put an officer right outside her door so she's safe. As she's sitting on the bed, totally traumatized, she realizes something. She only saw him enter her apartment on that video. She doesn't know if he actually left. As she's sitting there, she feels breathing on her ankles. She runs out, the cop comes in, and he finds the tall, creepy man under the bed holding a knife and a camera.
Always lock your front doors. A kid living with both of his parents decided to watch a movie for their family weekly movie night. He then gets up to use the restroom. As he is in the restroom, he sees all of the power in the house cuts off, and then he hears 2 loud thumps. He locks the bathroom door and hears heavy objects being dragged across the hallway. The kid, freaking out, runs out of the bathroom and runs into the restroom. Once he is inside the room, he locks the door. As he locks the door, he jumps in bed and acts like he's asleep and hopes that this person who is in the house will ignore a child sleeping. He closes his eyes and hears the door creak at the same time. He squints his eyes and sees a man with no eyes dragging the bodies of both of his parents. The man dragging his parents sits his mom's dead body in a chair facing him, and then sets the dad's body on the floor facing up. It was almost like whoever was in the house who killed them wanted him to see it. He then sees the man writing something on the wall and then climbs under his bed. He laid there for hours knowing that if he moved a muscle, he would end up just like his parents. He finally built up enough courage to read the wall, and the writing on the wall said, "I know you're awake."
This is why you should never leave the table when you're on a blind date. One of my best friends and I worked at the same restaurant. When I came in later that day for my shift, she told me a crazy story. She said that her first table were this guy and this girl, and she could tell they were on a first date. The girl was nervous, so she ordered a glass of wine. As far as she knew, the date seemed to be going well, and the girl got up to go to the bathroom. Right when my friend was about to come over and bring the silverware, she saw him put something in her wine. My friend, obviously terrified and freaking out, let our manager know, who then let the police know, and ran into the bathroom to tell her what was going on. The girl ended up staying in the bathroom until the police came, arrested him, and escorted him out of the building. It was noon.
I just found out that my daughter is engaged and getting married to a man who is 20 years older than her. She's 19 and he's almost 40. Apparently, she's been seeing this man for the last 6 months and recently announced their engagement. I am in disbelief. What makes it worse is that she had confided in my sister, her aunt, about this when she first started seeing this guy. My sister encouraged her to do what makes her happy and basically pushed her into this relationship. Now she swears up and down that he's the love of her life and they're meant to be. She just told me about the relationship 2 weeks ago because she said she knew her father and I wouldn't be okay with it and was afraid of my reaction. She wanted me to meet her future husband before she introduced him to the rest of the family, so she invited me to brunch with them. When I arrived, I could instantly tell that this man knew what he was doing. I can't fathom what a 19-year-old and a 40-year-old have in common. I know this man is well off from the way he spoke about work. I could feel my teeth grit every time he put his hand on my daughter's lap, and it made me extremely uncomfortable to see them affectionate towards each other. Throughout the entire brunch, I was biting my tongue. However, when he mentioned that he wanted to purchase a house in another state for them to start a family soon after the wedding, I lost it. Things got extremely heated from here.
Part 2. My daughter is engaged to a man 20 years older than her. My daughter is 19 and engaged to a 40-year-old who she's been dating for 6 months. At brunch, he mentioned that he was going to move them to another state and start a family soon after the wedding. This was my breaking point. This man already has been married 3 times and has a few children from those marriages. He's also closer to my age than her age, and his children are closer to her age. My daughter could tell that I was about to burst because she quickly tried to change the subject. However, I slammed my hand on the table and expressed how inappropriate this relationship is. I called this man out for basically grooming my daughter. My daughter quickly came to his defense, saying that age is just a number and that she's a consenting adult. I told her that I would never approve of this and left. My husband and I are furious about the situation and have tried telling our daughter that this is wrong. However, every time we try to talk to her about this, she blows up on us. She's made it clear that we can't talk her out of it and I'm at a loss. Now she's invited the rest of the family to dinner to meet her future husband. Everyone has been messaging me about it nonstop. Some are shocked about the age difference and others, like my sister, are telling me that I should stop trying to stand in the way of love. I want to shake my daughter into reality, but I feel that every time I mention my disapproval, it pushes her further towards him. Am I wrong and should I just accept it?
Story time! Okay, so this one night around 1 in the morning, I went to go take a shower. After I take my shower, I get out and I usually always bring my phone with me and I see that my brother messages me. He messaged me saying, "Hey, are you okay? I hear someone crying. Why are you crying?" And in my head, I'm like, well, I wasn't crying, so who's crying? I get out the shower and I go to his room and his door is wide open. I go and I ask him what happened and he said, "I had my door open and all of a sudden I just hear a woman start crying. I thought it was you because you're the only one that's awake. It sounded really bad, that's why I messaged you." So I told him, no, that wasn't crying at all. I was like, maybe you're just hearing things. I then asked him why he had his door open because obviously everyone's asleep and it's really dark in the hallway, so something creepy is bound to happen. After that, we just got over it and we went to bed. About 2 days later, it's the same scenario. I go to take a shower at 1 or 2 in the morning and everyone's asleep. After my shower, that's when I step out in the hallway, but for some reason I didn't turn on the lights this time. All of a sudden, I start hearing a woman crying. But then I hear my brother talking to someone on the phone, so I was like, oh, maybe it's one of his friends. I get closer to his door and the cry gets louder. That's when I realized that it's probably coming from the closet right next to his door. I opened his door right away, hoping that whoever he was talking to was crying, but it wasn't. I told him what happened and we still haven't found out what it was to this day. Story time! Okay, so a few years ago, my tia lost her son to cancer when he was only 6 years old. Now, fast forward a couple of years, my tia tells everyone that she wants to throw herself a birthday party because she hasn't had fun since her son passed. Fast forward a few days later and it's her birthday and we all get to the party and we're having a lot of fun. But then me and my cousins were being chismosas and we began to explore the ranch. So we ended up walking into a field where they grow all the crops. As we're walking, we see this little kid running through the water. And obviously we were like, what the hell is that? So then we walked closer to the little kid, but then he started running, so we all panicked and we ran back to the party. We told everyone, but they didn't believe us and they said that it was probably just a worker. Fast forward 3 to 4 hours later, we're still at the party having fun, but then my tia gets a call. And the person on the phone told her that her son wants to let her know that he is here to celebrate her birthday. And that he's happy so she doesn't have to look for him anymore or be sad anymore. Till this day, me and my cousins still don't know if that was her son that we saw playing in the water, but we still feel really bad for running away from him.
Story time! The time I did an influencer's nails. So as you all know, I used to take clients back in the day. This happened about a year ago. They DM'd me on Instagram saying they found me on TikTok and would love to get their nails done. And of course, I accepted because I was such a huge fan of them. Then she sent me the nail design that she wanted done. And this set had literally bling design on all fingers. It was a lot. And then said she's free the next day. And I said, okay, great. I was so nervous and excited, so I practiced the set so many times and I literally didn't sleep. So the day comes and she would literally refuse to say anything to me, like her manager would talk for her, which was pretty odd, but I'm here to do her nails. And the nails came out just the way she wanted, and then she refused to pay me and said she'll pay me through promotion and never promoted me.
Okay, so story time. So basically one time in 5th grade, my dad took me to get breakfast from Dunkin' Donuts. We went there before school like always, and as we were there, this strange man outside was staring at me and like making faces. Super creepy. We didn't know him or anything, so we walked inside and I was kind of freaked out. I told my dad that I was creeped out by him and he told me that nothing bad was gonna happen. Or so he thought. So we got our foods and we ate it, everything was fine, you know, chill. After we were done, we got up to leave. The man was gone by now, so I felt better But then on the way to my school, I saw him walking on the sidewalk. Like, I figured he was going to his house or, like, somewhere else. When we got to my school, no one was outside. It was kind of weird. We went to open the door because my dad was a part of the PTA, so he came in with me. The door, for some reason, was locked. My music teacher out of nowhere ran out and brought us inside quickly. She told us that our whole school was on code red. Scary. And that a man was in our school, so we went inside and I went and hid in the music room. Like for part 2. Okay, so part 2. So I went and hid in the music room. Dad was in the PTA room, which was close by. Literally started crying because I was so scared and they weren't telling us anything because we were too young. I guess they didn't want to scare us. That didn't work. Once the code red was over, about 30 minutes later, we went to class. I went to go find my dad and make sure he was okay and see if he knew anything, and he didn't. When I got in my classroom, we were all talking about it, and my teacher said that the man just walked in and told them he was looking for one of his teachers from like 15 years back. Huh? They gave us a description of the man, and I realized it was the same man from Dunkin' Donuts. He just walked in my school. I was freaked out because I saw him at Dunkin' Donuts before school started, and I hoped I never saw him again. But a few weeks later, I saw him again multiple times at the same Dunkin' Donuts. He literally just stared at me all the time. So yeah, that's my little story.
Creepy story time about how my aunt passed away, part 2. So like I said, she makes us all sit down at the kitchen table and she pulls out a Ouija board. She was like, I found out how I can get some answers. I just feel like I need you guys around me for positive energy. And my family is very, very religious. Like, we don't fuck with that shit. But because my mom felt bad for her, she let her use it in our house. But my mom didn't want my sisters and I around that, so she just sent us to bed. Well, the next morning, I wake up and I ask my mom what happened with the Ouija board situation. My mom just said that it was really scary, because before she thought it was like a load of bullshit, and she said that her and my dad didn't touch the Ouija board, because like I said, they were very religious and did not mess with that stuff. But apparently, it said for her not to buy a house with the numbers 2815. Well, 2 years later, my aunt got remarried, and her husband ended up having 2 kids. So they bought a new house, and no, it didn't have the numbers on it. One of their kids accidentally shattered the glass door, so they went and got a new one, and it came with those exact numbers on it. 2 days later, the house burnt down and nobody survived.
One time I had to babysit one of my neighbor's kids overnight. We're gonna call the kid Benny. The parents didn't really tell me anything when they left me alone with Benny, but they left me a note and they were like, you can only open it in emergencies. So at this point, I'm alone with Benny. It's like 11 p.m. and I told Benny, I was like, dude, you should like get to bed. It's late. Then Benny starts getting really red and he's like, no, we don't want to sleep alone. Sleep with us, please. I didn't know why Benny said us, but I was like, whatever, okay, like, yeah, I'll sleep in your room, like, it's fine. So fast forward a couple hours, it's like 3 in the morning at this point. This is the best part. Benny starts talking in his sleep and he's like, take her instead. You're not my friend anymore. I am not yours. And I try waking him up and I look at him and his eyes are wide open as he says this stuff. I was freaking out, so I went to go open the note that his parents said was only for emergency. So after Benny was literally acting possessed while I was sleeping in his room, I went to go open the note that his parents left that was only for emergencies. And guess what it said? The note literally said, sorry for not telling you, run him a cold bath, and call 911 if anything happens. I didn't know what to do, so I just went to go wake up Benny. So when I woke Benny up, he was really, really mad, and he kept trying to put his hands in front of my eyes and was telling me, please be nice to them, open up. And so long story short, I ran Benny a cold bath and then he locked himself in the bathroom. So at this point, Benny has literally locked himself in the bathroom and he's literally yelling out loud, please take her, not me, I won't tell anyone. This is the best part. So I called the police because I was scared for my life at this point. And the note that his parents left said to do that. So the cops tried calling Benny's parents, but they couldn't get a hold of them, but they got a hold of the grandparents. And eventually his grandparents came. So his grandparents come and they're like, we're gonna take him to a priest. And they told me to leave.
Part 1 of how I stole my boyfriend's side chick. My boyfriend Zach and I decided to check out a new restaurant in town for date night. We got in his car and started to head out. He usually has better cell coverage than me, so we were using the navigation on his phone to get to the new spot. I noticed his buddy from work, Matt, was texting him as usual. However, this time I noticed the heart emojis out of the corner of my eye at the top of the screen from Matt, which I thought was weird. I started to think about it, and Matt would always text pretty late at night, and my boyfriend always seemed really happy when texting him. I played it off like I was going to look for a faster route, picked up his phone, and quickly copied down the number. When we got to the restaurant, I started paying attention and noticed Zach texting throughout our date. The next day, I called the number and a girl named Jessica answered. He saved her number under Matt and told me he was a buddy from work for months. We started talking and she told me that she had no idea that he had a girlfriend. She also told me that they met on Tinder and they've been talking for a while. She was really honest and cool about it, and she was just as mad as I was. We decided to meet up and talk some more about what we were going to do to get back at him. This is when things got interesting. Part 2 of how I stole my boyfriend's side chick. Jessica and I decided to meet up downtown and come up with a plan on how we were going to confront Zach about playing us both. We were planning on doing it together to make him as uncomfortable as possible. I was surprised when I first saw her because she was drop dead gorgeous, which made me a little nervous at first. We met up at a brunch spot and began talking over mimosas. She was furious with Zach for wasting her time and lying to her, as was I. Everything she was saying was exactly how I felt. A few more mimosas in and she said, we don't need him, we're way too cute for him anyways, especially you. That's when she grabbed my hand to comfort me. When she grabbed my hand, I got nervous and jokingly made a comment about how I'm done with men. Surprisingly, she agreed and said we should start dating women instead with a smile. We went shopping after brunch and ended up back at her place a few hours later drinking wine. A few glasses in, we began trying on and modeling some of the new clothes we bought. One thing led to another and we hooked up. We really hit it off and we stayed up all night talking and laughing. I went to her place again the next night and the night after that. We both ended up completely ghosting Zach and dating each other instead. It's been over a year now and we couldn't be any happier. So, thanks, Zach.
Story time of how I found out that my mom was actually my older sister. My older sister never really liked me as a child. We were never close. I never knew why, but I was guessing it was because of the 10-year age gap. But I'm pretty sure she hated me because she couldn't even look me in the eye. I cannot make this up. She would not look me in the eye. But she never really talked to my parents either. She kind of just kept to herself all the time. Sometimes I have vivid memories of when we were younger and she would always be arguing with my parents about something, and I always thought it had something to do with me. Well, I was right. It had everything to do with me because eventually my sister turned 18 and she moved out. For 2 years, I didn't talk to her at all. I honestly don't even think I had her number saved, and I'm pretty sure that she didn't have mine. Well, 2 years later, and I was 10 at the time, she reached out to me via social media. I'm not sure how she found my Instagram name, but it was just my name, so she probably just typed that in and found me. She DM'd me and told me that she wanted to talk about something very important and that she would like to talk over the phone. So we exchanged numbers and we called that same night. And she told me that when she was younger, my dad had taken advantage of her and gotten her pregnant and had me.
Girls, tell me about a time where your quick thinking probably saved your life. I'll go first. 2 years ago, I was walking my dog at the park and a man approached me and asked to take a picture of her. And I said yes, because why not? It's a picture of a dog. So he starts taking a picture of my dog, and then I realized that he was like holding up her collar, and then it hit me. My address is on that collar. He's not taking a picture of my dog, he's taking a picture of my address. So I told him that I actually didn't feel comfortable with him having a picture of my dog, and I asked him to delete it. So he deletes it and then like starts walking away really fast. And I was like, "Excuse me, sir, no, could you also go into your deleted album and delete it from there?" And he goes, "I don't have a deleted album." And I was like, "You have an iPhone. Everybody has a deleted album. Could you please delete the picture?" And he was like, "Sorry, I don't have a deleted album," and like keeps walking away. And keep in mind, this is like 2 PM in a park. Like there's other people around. So now I'm like chasing after him and I'm telling him, "Sir, I know you have the album. I will show you where the album is. Can you please go onto your phone so that we can delete the picture?" Oh, part two. I'm sorry for the delay. So I'm still chasing after him, and people at the park are like starting to look at us now because I'm chasing after him and I'm telling him to stop walking. And so he stops, and I tell him again to delete the photo from the deleted album, and he goes, "I don't have a deleted album." And I was like, "Yes, you do. Everybody does. It'll take 10 seconds. And he goes, "Fine." And he like goes in his phone, does something for a second. He goes, "There, it's gone." And I was like, "Could I see the deleted album just to make sure it's gone?" And he goes, "No, you can't look at my phone." And I was like, "I don't want to look at your phone. I just want to see the album just to make sure the picture is gone. That's it." And he goes, "No, you're not going to look at my phone." And I was like, "Sir, I'm not going to stop and I'm not going to leave until you show me the album. So please just show me the album so we can be done with this." So he shows me the album. The picture was still there. So I made him delete it in front of my eyes. What if I hadn't noticed that he took a picture of my address? And what if I went home that day and, you know, that night when I took my dog out to pee, he was outside waiting for me? I mean...
Hey, I can't be the only one. Who else knows people that have killed other people?
Finally, something that I can actually relate to. So my grandma killed her mom, so she killed my great-grandma. It's kind of a crazy story, but back in the 90s, my grandma was over at her house giving her a bath. She was elderly, so my grandma was kind of in charge of taking care of her. During the bath, my grandma brought up the past about how she was abused as a child by one of her stepdads, and her mom then basically admitted to knowing about the abuse but blamed her for it instead of the stepdad, which sent my grandma into a rage. She ended up drowning my great-grandma, and then after she was dead, instead of calling the police, she cut up her body into 8 different pieces, put them in garbage cans, filled the cans with cement, and then put these garbage cans in different storage units all throughout my hometown where I grew up. When the police were investigating, she lied and said my great-grandma was in Hawaii with this wealthy man she met and even faked letters from her. It's pretty crazy.
Story time. I babysat a lot of kids in my neighborhood, and there was this one night that I was babysitting a 2-year-old. It was around 10 o'clock at night, so the kid was sleeping, and I was just sitting in the living room. In the living room, there was a big TV, a couch, and then behind me, it was a wall with a giant window. So it was really late at night, I had nothing to do, so I was Snapchatting my friends. If you Snapchat anybody, I'm sure you know that sometimes you Snapchat really fast. You don't even know or look at what you're sending. I was mass snapping all my friends, and then one of them replied 10 minutes later. And he said, "Who's that guy behind you?" And I turned around and no one was there, so I'm like, he's playing a joke on me. But then I get another Snapchat from this friend I had, and she lives all the way across the country. They don't know each other. And she said, I think there's someone outside. So I was really freaked out because I was alone. There was a giant window behind me. Apparently there was someone outside. I wasn't gonna call the child's parents because I didn't want to freak them out, but I was scared. So then I went around the house, locked all of the doors. Sorry, it's a really long story, like for part 2.
Story time about how I almost died when I was 4 years old. So my mom was at work and my dad and I were at home. And my dad was watching TV while I was trying to do headstands. I don't know, guys, I thought I was an acrobat at the time. So anyways, I had a penny in my mouth. I know, it's super dirty, don't come at me. I was 4, I didn't know. And my dad didn't know. And every time that I would do these headstands, I would roll over onto my back. Well, I rolled over and I started choking. And my dad looks over and I'm laying on the floor literally like freaking dying. He's freaking the hell out. So he calls 911 and I got rushed to the hospital in an ambulance. And the penny was sticking straight up at the time, so nobody was really worried about getting it out right then and there. And my throat was like holding that penny in place, so no, my dad couldn't do the Heimlich or whatever the heck it's called. Well, the penny flipped. And I stopped breathing and everybody was freaking out and they had to hurry up and get it out before I died.
Part 2 about how my boyfriend found out that his best friend got me pregnant. So like I said, my boyfriend was black, his best friend was white, and because I doubted that it was his best friend's kid, I decided to wait it out. Say it with me, bad idea. So fast forward, I'm in the delivery room and I decide not to have my boyfriend in there. Well, let's just say good thing that he did. Bitch, whenever this thing popped out, it was white as fucking paper. So I was like to the doctor, oh my gosh, like I'm gonna have a panic attack, please get the baby out of the room, I don't want anybody around the baby right now. So when my boyfriend came back in the room, I was like, oh, we can't see the baby, he's having some issues. He's over here freaking out, I'm having a fucking panic attack about what I'm gonna do. And they brought my kid back and I was like, that's not my kid. And this girl looked so confused, she was like, oh, okay. And my boyfriend and I are laughing, we're like, oh, haha, that's funny. Then she comes back into the room and she's like, ma'am, this is your kid. So my boyfriend started screaming and he broke up with me after that. Like, how rude to just leave me with a kid by myself. No, I'm just joking. I know that was pretty fucked.
Story time. A girl named Akira Kendrick sent me this story, and the background of it is that her dad was very abusive to her mother, and her mother got custody of Akira, and her dad was not happy about that. Anyway, so Akira was with her aunt and her cousins at her grandmother's house, all on her mother's side, and her dad stops by to say hello. And Akira's outside playing with her cousin, and her dad comes up to her and grabs her arm and says, do you want to go to Walmart with me? And at the time, she's only 7, so all she hears is toy aisle, so she says, yes, let's go. So they get in the car, they head to Walmart, she gets some really nice pom-poms, and then he says, okay, let's go back to your grandmother's house. So he starts driving and he gets on the highway, and Akira knows that her grandmother's house is right around the corner from Walmart, so he does not need to get on the highway. So she says, Dad, where are we going? And he gets really mad and says, shut up, sit down, it does not matter. So Akira's in the back seat, she's really scared, and she just shuts her mouth. So after being in the car for a while, they eventually arrived at this really old, abandoned, beat up house. And when they walk in, Akira sees about 25 people and she does not know any of them. Her dad brings her to a room, puts her in a little closet, throws her some toys and her pom-poms and says, play. Part 2 is coming right now. Part 2 of Akira's dad literally kidnapping her. So when they get to the house, Akira is really scared. She doesn't know any of these like 25 people. Her dad brings her to a room, throws her in a closet, puts some toys in there and says play. So after about an hour of being in a little closet with some toys, she finally decides to get up and go look for her dad. So she opens the door and starts looking around and there is no one in the house. There is not even a single trace of somebody ever being there. So of course she starts freaking out and crying. She doesn't know where she is. She's so far away from her grandmother's house and she doesn't have a phone. And so eventually after 3 hours, she hears somebody. She looks up and her dad is standing there and he says, come on, let's go, the cops are outside. So basically Akira's aunt called the cops and they had a search warrant for him. They ended up finding her dad and they said to him, if you don't take us to her, you will go to jail. And obviously from what I just said, he finally took them to her at this random old abandoned house and they found her. And they ended up putting him in jail anyways, because why not? 2 years in jail and 1 year on probation. Don't steal children, people. Don't steal them.
So I work at Bed Bath & Beyond, and first of all, the 3 B's in Bed Bath & Beyond should not stand for that. It should stand for bitches be bonkers, because these people come up in there and they act crazy. I was checking out this boomer woman, and she was like, can you tell me how much this is? And I scanned her item, and I was like, yeah, it's $19.99. And she looked at me and she went, like the Family Feud buzzer. She went, like, it was such a good sound effect. I'm convinced that she was the Family Feud buzzer. Like, they had her on salary and shit. She seriously went, nope, it's supposed to be $14.99. And by the sound of her I know that is not the first time that she has done that. I know that that is well rehearsed, that she uses whenever she thinks she...
I literally want to cry. So if you didn't know, I have a sister, and her name's Ashley. And we both have boyfriends. And every night we both fall asleep on the phone with our boyfriends. So one day we're all hanging out and we're like just talking. And my sister's boyfriend looks at me and he's like, "You need to stop going into your sister's room in the middle of the night." And I look at him and I'm like, "What are you talking about? I don't have a reason to go into her room. Like I don't go into her room, especially in the middle of the night." Then my boyfriend hops in the conversation and he's like, No. He's like, "No, I hear Ashley go into Kayla's room every night and stare at her." So me and my sister both look at each other and we're like, "We don't go into each other's rooms, do we?" And we agreed that we do not. And they said this has been going on for months. So for months, somebody or something has been going into me and my sister's room for about 15 minutes every night and watching us sleep. But it only gets worse.
What's one really bad thing you did as a child that you kept secret for your entire life and didn't tell nobody? I'll go first. I got a lot of stories like this, but this is just one of them. So my mama used to put me in daycare, and in my daycare, we used to do field trips, and we went to the YMCA. So while we were in the pool, this one white kid comes up to me. He asked me, like, "Why are you black?" And I was kind of embarrassed, but I wasn't mad at the kid. I was more embarrassed than I was mad. And I told him that my parents painted me every single day. And I was thinking back at the time when I scraped my knee and the skin came off and there was like no blood. It was just bone. But I didn't know that it was bone. I thought that I was just white underneath. So I was like, it's true, like I can peel my skin off and prove it. When I did that, I peeled skin off my finger and it was a lot of skin and I started bleeding really bad. So the water started getting red and the daycare people tried to get everybody out the water like there was something going on. And then once everybody was out of the water, one of the daycare people go, "I'm so sorry, everybody. I lost my tampon. I need to find it." Okay, so what happened was pretty self-explanatory, but I can make a part 2 if you guys want.
This is why you should never take a prank too far. Once there were two young twins who lived in a small town and they were known for constantly misbehaving. One day a man had passed away peacefully in his home and the twins wanted to play a prank on everyone else living in the town, so they snuck into the house and started messing with the man's body. One twin moved his mouth like a puppet and the other one poked his eyes out with a stick. As they were doing this, they heard footsteps. They couldn't find anywhere to hide, so they placed the body back in the coffin, then got in the coffin themselves and closed the lid. But what they didn't know was they were taking the coffin straight to the funeral. The people carrying the coffin noted that it was much heavier than usual but brushed it off. No one even noticed that the twins were gone until the coffin was lowered. The twins' mother appeared at the cemetery about the missing twins, which stopped the funeral and began a search. Eventually, the man carrying the coffin confessed that the coffin had weighed more than it was supposed to, so they lifted it out and opened the lid. They did find the boys there, but they found them lying on top of the body, whose hands were wrapped tightly around each of their necks. The twins had been strangled to death.
Story time about how I got catfished by my best friend. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. My now ex-best friend and I hung out almost every single day. We were super close. Let's call her Natalie. Natalie and I would sometimes get into drama and her mom didn't like this. She considered me a bad influence on Natalie. But honestly, the drama was coming from both sides. Natalie and I had a group chat with one other person. One day, Natalie sends me a message through the group chat saying that she couldn't be my best friend anymore and that she's really sorry. She really didn't explain why though. I was crushed. She had been my best friend for so long. 3 weeks ago, I noticed that someone added me on Snapchat by search. I didn't really think too much about it. I added them back and we started having a conversation. She was a young girl my age and we started having conversations about boys we had crushes on, school, and lots of other things. I asked her to send me a picture of herself and she said she couldn't. That should have been the first red flag. Then we decided to meet up at the mall. I wait for her at the mall, but she never. I'm at the mall waiting for this girl to show up, but she never does. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Like I said before, this girl told me she couldn't send me any pictures, so I didn't even know what she looked like. That's when I started suspecting something. We got along so well in our Snapchat conversations, it was almost too good to be true. So of course, I decide to call her. And guess who answers? Natalie, with her new friends who she knows that I hate. At that moment, I realized that she dumped me and then got with these new girls that she knew I hated. Of course, I was furious. I wanted to say something, but before I could, Natalie hung up the phone. And of course she did. She knew I was going to go off on her. Well, I start calling Natalie's phone several times, and she doesn't answer. Then I see that she unadded me off Snapchat and blocked me. So now I have no way of getting in contact with her. I spent weeks talking to this girl only to find out it was my ex-best friend catfishing me. So of course, I drive all the way to Natalie's house and her mom answers. Part 3 is
Story time on how me and my stepdad were doing the nasty and my mom walked in on us. Okay, so boom. I was 18 at the time and my stepdad was 40. My stepdad been with my mom for like 2 years and it's only the 3 of us in the house. My stepdad always treated me well and gave me lots of money. Every time my mom would tell me no, here comes my stepdad to the rescue, turning that to a yes. Me and my stepdad were alone together a lot and it would be very flirty between us. As the days went by, we got flirtier and flirtier and farther and farther. It started off as flirting, then we cuddled, and then cuddling turned into making out. I literally couldn't wait till my mom goes to work so I could spend time with him. My mom didn't suspect a thing. When my mom was home, I barely talked to my stepdad and I always stayed in my room. At this point, me and my stepdad didn't do the nasty yet, but this night I was gonna make sure it happened. Cause I seen my stepdad kiss my mom goodbye and I was pissed. Once she left, I turned it up, like for part 2.
Story time about the time a nail salon took advantage of my blindness. My sister and I got our nails done. We used to go all the time, and while the lady was doing my nails, she asked me how I knew how much money I had. At the time, I used cash, never again after this, but I told her that I folded my bills a certain way. I told her that I folded my 20s different than my 10s, different than my 5s, different than my 1s. Anything of her asking that question, I think it's a good question, and I just thought she was curious. I got done with my nails, she walked me towards the front, and my sister was actually just finishing up with hers, so it was perfect. Another man at the front and he asked me how I knew how much money I had. And the same thing. Before I left to go to the nail salon, I made sure exactly how much money I had. My sister helped me count it, helped me make sure that I folded the right bills just so I knew how much I had, how much I would spend. I gave her the money. Positive that I gave her the right amount because it was just folded, it was folded perfectly, and I counted it out. She takes it, starts talking in a different language, and then tells me that I owe her $20 more. Or I didn't, and I told her the exact amount I gave her. And she's like, no, you didn't give me this amount, you gave me that amount. Like for part 2.
So when I was a sophomore in high school, I had this teacher who would only let the students in her class use the restroom one time per semester. Well, one day I raised my hand and I was like, excuse me, I don't remember her name. Can I please use the restroom? And she was like, no, you can't because you've already used the restroom in my class this semester. Well, excuse me, you can't dictate my bladder. So I'm like all frustrated and I started secretly texting my mom because I wasn't allowed to use my phone in class. And I was like, Mom, I'm sitting in class right now. My teacher won't let me use the restroom. And she was like, I'll take care of it for you. And I was like, okay. So like 5 minutes goes by and all of a sudden my teacher's phone starts ringing and she walks up to it and answers it and she's like, hello? Yeah. Okay, thank you. And then she walks up to me like so angry and she like slams the pass on my desk and she was like, since you have to go that bad. And I was like, yeah, I really do, thanks. And I got up and left. I didn't even have to go to the bathroom. It was just the principle of it. I just roamed the halls.
Part 2 of the worst customer ever. After she requested to speak to the manager, I went to get the shift lead and explain the situation. He immediately knew what customer I was referring to. My manager went to speak to her as I remade her drink a 4th time. She demanded that the drink be free and that we also let her pick a food item on the house for wasting her time. When we refused, she went ballistic and started screaming that she would never come here again and that we lost a customer. She demanded that we get the owner of the store down here immediately and said that she wouldn't leave until the owner arrives. We told her that she would have to leave or we would call the cops. She continued screaming at us, took the drink without paying, and knocked over one of the displays on her way out. My manager said that this customer complained almost every day, told me I'm doing a good job, and thanked me for finally getting rid of a Karen. I couldn't believe my eyes when she came back a few days later. I was dreading having to take her order again. To my surprise, my manager confronted her about not paying the other day and knocking over our display. He then asked her to leave, but she went crazy again and refused to leave, and this time we did have to call the cops. Ultimately, she left before the police came and hasn't been back since.
I am going to be telling you a scary childhood story. When I was 2 years old, my mom passed away. My dad wasn't in the picture, so I went to go live with my grandparents. My grandparents lived in a super old home that was built in the 1800s. I was a very imaginative child. So when I told my grandparents that I used to see people in the house, they just didn't believe me. There was one lady in particular that I would always see. She would sit at the end of my bed and watch me fall asleep. I wasn't scared of her because I thought she was an actual person. Plus, I was super little, so nothing even crossed my mind. At this point, I was like 4 or 5 years old. I remember her talking to me constantly. She even sang me the song Rockabye Baby to get me to go to bed one night. Every single day when I would get home, I could see her in my window. At that point, I thought she was just waiting for me. She just wanted to be my friend, right? But as I got older, things started to get really weird between me and her. She wasn't this nice lady anymore. Stay tuned for part 2.
Y'all, please! I will never hang out with a white boy again.
this white boy came to pick me up. Cause you know, I was trying to get that little diddly dick. And as soon as we get into the car, he's smiling at first and then he starts looking at me weird. I'm just like, okay, whatever. So we drive to his house. His mom is... I'm not gonna be able to get through this. His mom is there and she looks fucking terrified when she looks at me. I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm probably the first bad bitch that he brought to this house. I'm sorry. So we go into his room. You know, we're just chilling, watching a movie, whatever. And then his mom pulls him out of the room. When he comes back, he asks me, do you need to go to the hospital? I'm like, no. Why the fuck would I need to go to the hospital? He looks at me. He's like, oh, me and my mom noticed that your scalp is peeling off. It was my fucking lace. My fucking lace friend. So I'm like, what? And I run into the bathroom and I'm looking in the mirror. I look in the mirror and I see a whole part of my lace is lifted up. Once I told him it was my hair, he got mad and called me a catfish. He made me Uber myself.